Welcome to the next big thing, the 2469 Community Podcast. Joining us today, we have Nader AlBastaki, Managing Director of Dubai Future District Fund, Jamil Shinawi, Co-founder and CEO of Ahoy and Actual VC, Pablos Holman, Managing Partner of Deep Future, and Darshan, Partner at Actual VC and CFO of Ahoy.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Good
man.
evening. Hi. Nice to have everyone here. So we're here to talk about investment today.
All right, let's do it.
I think
Most interesting subject ever.
Definitely exciting.
Or we could just talk about investments.
yeah. I mean, we've been in the game on both sides, all of us. I think this is the most common thing. We're all builders and entrepreneurs who also invest and moved from side to side.
Yeah.
And I think this is why we're here to talk about both perspectives, which should be more efficient, I think, no?
All right.
Sure.
So how do you like to roll off with that?
Well, I think, it's interesting because you see a lot of people who are investors talking about like the machinery of investing, which to me isn't that interesting. But I realized that when I was an entrepreneur, one of the things I got really, really wrong was I did not understand like the business model of venture capitalists. And I was constantly disappointed in them. But it's in retrospect, now that I'm on the other side, I understand, this is why I didn't get anywhere with those guys. And so I think it's very important for entrepreneurs to understand what the business their investors are in looks like, and understand what the reason that they're getting all these seemingly dumb questions and why it seems so formulaic and all that kind of stuff. Because if you are an entrepreneur and you're trying to raise money, you're not going to get very far if you don't have an appreciation for what your partners, your investors, are really trying to accomplish. So, yeah, I think I think we have to do it.
I mean, if we start off with this, what would be, if we were each of us to give a few pointers, what is the crash course to an entrepreneur to understand the other side? Let's start with that, I think.
I mean, one of the things that, looking at anything from both perspectives, realize that how do VCs not just look at the business idea, they actually look at risks, they look at business risk, they look at team risk, they do quite a bit of, I would say, qualitative work as well, which sometimes the entrepreneurs miss. So usually entrepreneurs say that, they look at more of quantitative stuff and say, yes, I am in a growing market. I am in a sector that is really doing well. Why would a VC not invest in me? But that is not just the only angle or the review criteria. Sometimes there are a lot of qualitative factors that get into play as well, including the capability of the team, where they're heading, where they are based. So this also plays a part when, as you said, when entrepreneurs don't understand why VCs are seemingly not responding or not going ahead with the investment.
Sorry.
I was just going to say growing market is a euphemism for lots of competition.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I want to touch on. There were two things that came out of what you were saying there. One is, what are they looking for as VCs? And one is, you mentioned beta risk versus what they're really looking for is where's the difference you're bringing to the table, right? And the other part is, what is their mandate? I mean, people just go up to VCs expecting that all of them have the same view on everything, the world, investments, and right away off the bat, if you haven't done your research, you're not asking them the right questions. And what I mean by right questions is every question, the stupid ones, the nots, and really getting to the point where you're fixing it with every single discussion as you're going by with them. One part of, well, at least my experience that I guess in hindsight was something that of a learning curve was there's a little bit of ego there. Like I want to go in and feel like they get it and they're going to buy into my first pitch, and that first pitch needs to be perfect. There's no perfect pitch. That is a constantly changing cycle, and that's one thing that I think people. I guess can definitely leverage is just go out and learn and get feedback constantly.
100%. I think the mandate bit is so crucial. because looking at it from a VC perspective, they made commitments to their investors that this is where they're going to invest their money. Now, even if the entrepreneur comes up with something amazing, if it's not in the mandate, how would they even go ahead? So this is something is extremely crucial for entrepreneurs to understand that what is the mandate? Are they even talking to the right VCs in this case?
Yeah, I think there's a huge communication gap, especially in the Middle East and Asia. There is this thing where VCs do not have a spoken mandate because a lot of them wish to stay opportunistic. They are in an emerging market, technology-wise, that is growing super fast. So they actually want to stay a bit agnostic, but at the same time, there is an unspoken mandate. It might change once in the life of the fund, but it's not common, but it does happen. And for entrepreneurs, when that is not communicated, they just are, they come with this expectation. It almost feels like entitlement. Like, my idea is great. Why they're not investing? And that is wrong. Me personally, in my entrepreneurial career, even when I was angel investing, I don't think I actually understood that till later. Yeah, really.
I have a question on that, and maybe it's a more broad question for the group here. Is as an angel investor, obviously your cost of capital is not something you're constantly thinking about, and your commitments on a mandate perspective. But fast forward to today, and sort of the view that the cost of capital will remain high for at least the foreseeable, let's say, deployment cycle. What's your view on specific sectors and whether the VC model is resilient to it, or will there be, I don't know, tweaks maybe to it in your perspectives?
I mean, I think it really requires a lot of tweaks today. I think the model itself has to mature. I do believe that we go, generally as humanity, we go into these convergent and divergent cycles, and these cycles match economy, and they're getting shorter and shorter. It's like when you look at the steam age versus the industrial age, it's getting shorter and shorter. So matching that with technology, there was this time where investment was very attractive on a cost of capital basis on return when it came to SaaS, and still SaaS is viable. I'm not saying it's not, but more on digital transformation. At times, we need to go a little bit more up the value chain, I think. And that's why, for example, me personally and Pablos, we have a huge, and Darshan as well, we have like this huge love to deep tech.
I think one of the things to also consider, and sometimes it goes missed, is not just the cost of capital now, but what will it look like when the VC returns start getting unlocked? So you're making an investment right now, but comparing it to other opportunities at this stage is not the right comparison. It actually needs to be made over a 7 or a 10-year horizon. What would it look like? And when somebody does an exercise like that, I think VC returns do actually usually outperform. I would not say it's always the case, but they do actually yield a better return.
There's a pretty high correlation between the funds that were started in the most down markets and the highest returns in venture. And so my view is that we could try and guess what's the cycle. Is it shorter? Is it longer? Are we hitting the market right? But you're never going to guess right. I mean, somebody's going to guess right. Somebody's going to guess wrong. And we're going to find out in 5, 6, 7 years who it was. So I figure you're going to lose for sure if you don't play the game. So we should be investing now while we can. And, I think there's a flip side to that, which is like when things are super hot and it's, really frothy and people are paying ridiculous sums to invest in things, it's clear they lost track of like what it takes for a fund to perform. You can't, all those 2021 funds are doomed because they deployed a bunch of capital into crazy valuations, and you can't make it work in venture. We need to get really respectful of the power law if you want a fund to perform. So I think like right now is a great time to be investing in a fund if you can raise it. It's hard to raise a fund right now because of lack of liquidity. But for the people who are investing, I think they can do pretty well.
I'm curious how that translates now to the founder's lens. Is it a great time to be fundraising? Are there specific sectors that might benefit from this down cycle and the fact that it's a great time for VCs to be deploying? Just curious about if you see any different way that they might be approaching the problem as a fundraiser.
I mean, during a down market, it's very hard for founders to start, generally speaking. Because most of the investors that have the dry powder don't want to deploy. I'm talking about the majority here. And that testament, I do agree to what Pablos was saying, that great companies are always coming out of down markets. And it's one of these things where the rational and logical idea is the wrong one. It's a knee-jerk reaction, but it's not the right one. When you have a down market, invest. But yeah, there is a lot of dry powder. We've seen it since I think the late 2022. It's quite accumulating, increasing. There is a huge resistance. There is a lot of caution. People are going towards just proven models. People are going more and more. I mean, opportunistic capital, I'm talking specifically here, going more towards not just proven models, but later stages as well. And you see places like Europe, which is a very big place, and I cannot generalize, but most of Europe, there is a huge shy away from early stage, unfortunately. Which is making a lot of founders fled away. Even regulations in Europe that are making founders run away from places like Norway now. It's almost impossible to actually start a startup in Norway today. I mean,
we have one in Norway.
Yeah. Good luck. I really thought some prayers. But
thoughts and prayers. But I'm not worried about that one.
They can. I'm sure they can.
But you're right. And also, I think, I mean, look, if you're a founder, you just have to do it. Like, you can't be worried about all the macro shit.
Thank you.
You just have to do it. I know it's like we're VCs. It's our job to worry about that stuff. But even that is mostly a waste of time. Like, the truth is almost everything that's not early stage is not venture. Like, we call it venture, but it's like PE light or something. And, those folks, the ones you're talking about that are sitting on dry powder, waiting for things to return. The reason they're sitting on dry powder is because they don't want to call capital from LPs who don't have any liquidity. So we don't actually know how much money is out there. We have like a really fuzzy sense of it. And I think it's just, it's one of these things where, if you're a founder, your calling in life is to go build this thing. And you just have to go for it and try and figure it out. And there'll be different problems each time, which kind of problems you got at different cycles in the market or, whatever. It's always bad one way or another, even when it's good. So just go for it. That's what I think.
I think at some stage, startups can get pretty inventive, and we have seen that. Small startups start merging with each other to survive a downturn. They just start doing inventive stuff. So as you said, you just have to go for it. And the situations keep on changing. It's a long-term play. So end of the day, all of these situations it's almost like Murphy's Law. Whatever has to happen will happen in that cycle. So you just have to have something going on for you at that stage.
I think just touching on the reform point you mentioned, Nader, one of the biggest challenges for venture capital is that to be a successful venture capitalist, you have to use optics to really sell that dream and vision to LPs to give you money. But then you need to detach from that in your day-to-day operations and go and kick the tires and not follow the hype, and yet have those LPs believe in you because they're watching the hype. They believed they had almost the same reasons to believe in you as the same reasons
to believe in the hype. That's a good observation.
And honestly, I do sympathize. Only recently found sympathy, to be honest, just very honestly, with venture capitalists on that front. I never appreciated that. It's just my short-sightedness. I mean, just to be very honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, entrepreneurs are completely blind to that side of the equation as well. Except the side where they need to just introduce hype. Now everything has AI. I just recently here in Dubai, there is by the way a restaurant that makes AI pizza.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of sort of the deal flow that we've been seeing, and there's an interesting point to be made there around what do you focus your time? Is it that passion project, or is it that wrapper to the next hype cycle? And that's what we're seeing a lot of, is a lot of wrappers. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, yes, there's a hype cycle, but that wrapper is going to be eaten by the person that's the incumbent in that space, right? That's probably the next thing that they're looking to build. And yeah, I'm just curious if you're seeing certain similarities and what's going on with these hype cycles, or are you seeing, is there a lot of room for deep tech, and are you seeing a lot of interesting things come out in that space right now?
One of the things Darshan touched upon here was how your fund in liquidation would look like a few years ahead. Following hype is gonna look really bad. That's one thing for sure. So you can't do the things that only please your LPs because you're weary of your capital calls. Some people choose to do the balance. So I've seen a lot of funds that came into the region or to raise from the region here, for example, and they don't have any deals here. They just invest in the most mentioned deal in the news. They actually do that. And I think that is unfortunate, but it does actually work.
We need their money too, so it's okay. I think these are developmental stages that all have a place in the life of a startup. And I think that even though I despise it and I don't want to have anything to do with it, I think we do need people like that to invest at that stage, in the hype cycle stage, and we have to try a lot of things. So I don't.
But that begs the point now about the efficiency of capital and the cost of it as well. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, they're not going to last in the venture game, but we're getting resources out of them for these companies. So
I think it's almost required because with this kind of approach, that is how market learns. So people come and just look at the hype cycles and invest. But from there are startups that come through and who learn to be more efficient. There are startups that come and pick up those overhyped companies, maybe buy them off. VCs come and understand from those investments. So it's almost like this has usually happened. It's almost a pattern. Even it happened in the internet boom. A lot of capital was sprayed. Most of that didn't last, but from that we learned something, and there are a few good companies that came out of there. So I think it's almost like a beginning of a disruption.
It's all like Silicon Valley is like thousands of $1 million experiments. That's just how we do it. Every startup is an experiment. If you don't run enough experiments, you'll lose. And so we have to do it. And I think that, that's all very important to do in the early stages. What you want to do is just be really, if you're not the early stage investor, then you want to be smart about figuring out who to follow, because only some of those experiments have the potential to really go far enough to be a venture return. And so,
when it comes to your point about deep tech, the worst thing that could happen, in my opinion, is to have a hype about deep tech, which I kind of see some sort of science. It's inspired. It's like the survival of the AI hype is almost the deep tech. Thank you.
Looking for the next thing.
And it seems like deep tech, the power of AI and the power of some hardware components are powering the new wave of deep tech hype. And that is the most deceiving thing. But if we want to talk first about what is real deep tech, in my personal definition, which is not a book definition, and I could be wrong about it, it's keystone foundational technologies that really affect not just one vertical, but a lot of them. You're really going upstream If there ever was a value, you're at the aquifer or close to it. That is really deep tech, in my opinion. Deep tech could be in biotech, deep tech could be in material science, deep tech could be in information sciences like software, but really up the value chain. You're not really packaging necessarily a product, although some companies might have a shorter path to getting there. It could happen. It's not necessarily a rule, but deep tech, in my opinion, is one of the most resilient asset classes in all of venture capital that it's just very versatile. It will always have value in it. And when you have an economic downturn, it is probably that technology is going to make everything more efficient. It is actually more valuable in an economical downturn. If you look at, for example, I'll mention just one example, and during World War II, one of the most valuable technologies, it's a deep tech technology, which was biofuels, because countries that could not get fuel started making it from, algae and, other stuff. So, and they started making leather from bacteria and algae at that time as well in cars. Volkswagen actually was a company that employed those things. And that is real true value. It's the power to actually have really core technologies that will stand the test of time even. So that is what I define as deep tech.
I think it's a great definition. I usually describe deep tech as, actual breakthroughs. I think these are in the same way you describe fundamental technologies that actually grow the toolkit for what humans can do. I think that if your business is like, equivalent to starting up a taco wagon, then that's not technology, and there's no new technology there. And that's what I think we think we have this big tech industry, but the tech industry has mostly lost sight of the fact that it's the new technologies that give you those superpowers. Yeah. And that's what all the big wins are based on. And that's what's missing right now, I think, in a large way. So
I think what I just realized is that, and it's almost like deep tech cannot be a hype, because if it's a hype, that means a breakthrough has already happened. So technically deep tech is something which is not yet reached the hype cycle, because if people are already talking about it, that means a 0 to 1 moment, or the breakthrough has been done, and now people are just going to use it for their own use, which is not deep tech anymore.
No, but deep tech could become a hype by saying things that are deep tech, saying things that they are deep tech while they're not. Just like now, just big data became AI, although it's not AI.
Yeah. Exactly.
Any glorified.
Next year, we're going to rebrand it as AGI.
I'm curious about your views on this. So what I'm hearing is standing the test of time. It seems like more blue ocean thinking as opposed to red ocean thinking, where it's just an incremental change to what already exists. I'm curious about what it takes to and where you've seen these breakthroughs happen. Is there certain, so the example you gave was there's desperation, there was a war, there are other reasons that pushed people to innovate. I'm just curious about what it takes. Is it that additional motivation to find something because there is an absolute requirement on the other side for that innovation breakthrough? Or is it more, is open-endedness with the right support frameworks around there that creates some of these interesting setups?
I think there are two schools of thought here. One of which believes in the white elephants. The white elephants, as in a lot of these great ideas exist, they just need the opportunity to flourish. The other one is exactly what you described. So there has to be need for a problem to be solved. I am a fan of the white elephant approach more, but I really do believe that there are. So touching again on the same point of what would your fund look like by the time you liquidate it, and deep tech does require patient capital, which is very unattractive to a lot of investors. But the rewards are huge. Deep tech funds bring a lot of the time double-digit multiples if they did everything right. Now,
let's pick that apart. So first of all, I think what you're getting at with the war analogy, although we look in retrospect, it looks like the war caused the innovation. But a lot of what's really happening is the war causes investment in the innovation.
Yes.
It's not that it caused somebody to create an invention. It's just that that invention didn't get any attention until there was a war and we had to do it. So I think that it's easy to conflate those things in retrospect. But, you know, what we're doing here is saying, okay, there are breakthroughs in labs, in garages, they're in basements, they're around the world, they're in all different places, because, you know, the people who create these things are not going to, you know, TED and TechCrunch and stuff. They're, you know, they're actually working, and they're obsessed because they have an idea and they see the potential in it. And those are your inventors. And we largely ignore them in venture. Like, those are not the people
Thank you.
that venture capital has been aimed at. Venture capital got these stories in our heads from, you know, these extraordinary entrepreneurs who managed to make an extraordinary business at all costs, but a lot of them didn't have any tech. You know, in the recent years, you know, they did in the 80s and 90s. You know, what technology did Uber bring to the world? Like, what did Airbnb invent? You know, do they even have a single patent? Like, what is Instagram doing that's new technology? These are opportunists, and I'm not saying we don't need those things, but that's not technology. And when you do that, you're making maybe a product that people like and can use, but you're not really advancing the world in a meaningful way, I don't think. And so, you know, no major disrespect. I like all those products, but the point is, if you start with an actual technology that can give you a 10x, 100x, 1000x multiplier on something humans need to do, that's where technology makes a difference. And to beat you over the head about this, if you add up all the software companies in the world, including Facebook, Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, their revenue is about $2 trillion a year. Global GDP is at about $100 trillion a year. So this giant tech industry that we're all so excited about is something like 2% of what's going on in the world. You know, these are rough. There's software and other things too, but basically the point is, all that other stuff, $98 trillion a year, that's food, energy, water, sanitation, construction, apparel, all the things that every human on earth relies on that you can't get by without. You can get by without Uber, without Airbnb. You can get by without Instagram. You cannot get by without energy and food and water. So those industries, we take them for granted, but they're untouched by Silicon Valley. They're problems you won't solve with software. And what deep tech is an invention that makes those things 10x, 100x, 1000x better. And so when, you know, Jamil is talking about, you know, the massive opportunities, that's what we mean by massive. The TAM for a deep tech fund is like the GDP of planet Earth. So, you know, yes, you have to get there. And yes, there's a lot of, you know, bumps, and, you know, some of the models that we used for software don't apply, but there's, you know, we can pick that apart, but that's why we're so bullish on what we're doing.
I mean, just to address your point, I'm a huge believer of the competitive place theory. I spoke about this a lot, but I think when it comes to deep tech, because of its foundational definition that I believe in, and a lot of us, I think, might agree partially with this or fully, deep tech doesn't have a location or a market, as exactly stressing on the point you just mentioned. But again, the age of creating technology and deep tech, in my opinion, cannot be even in the longest war in human history, probably. Why? Because it starts with education. It really does. You have specific educational systems that do have more people that bring out technologies, but they usually create those stuff or those technologies only after they have moved, got exposed to the world. And there is this thing where we did, I hate to put statistics around serendipity of a eureka moment, but and it's wrong, by the way, but you always see people who are thinkers, philosophers, people who are opened outwardly to the world. They usually have lived in many places or have traveled a lot. Something I know that you like to do, but they actually get exposed a lot to a lot of life's perspectives and then reflect on that internally and create stuff. I am not saying it's a rule of thumb. Of course, I'll be wrong saying that, but there is no recipe for innovating anything in deep tech. And if you look at the end of the day, even technology, as you said, Pablos, all of technology, if we take everything in it, at the end of the day, the chips, the microprocessors, and all of those stuff, they are materials. They are coming back to manufacturing processes. They are made by people who are fed food or by machines that are powered by energy. And so I love to see, I always like to think about this continuous value chain. And I think if I get $1 for every time I say the value chain, I'll be a rich man today. So.
I'm curious, so where it starts can be anywhere from what I'm gathering. But what I picked up from both what Pablos and you, Jamil, just mentioned is it takes the right kind of attention. And I'm curious about how we get that right kind of attention. Your attention, for example, as investors, corporate and enterprise attention, and how do we get them super excited about this next big thing and listening to it when it's just for them, it's so far away from the current way of doing things. So one part of it is how do we get their attention? And the second part, I guess, in terms of commercializing and driving this is, does it take other forms of capital to make this happen? Is it the patient capital provider that you mentioned? Or do you need other forms of R&D grants, other forms of support mechanism to make this a reality?
We need it all. But I think there's it's important to look at it as a life cycle. Like there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, but the early stage investors are mostly not investing in technology. For decades now, ask any VC, they invest in the entrepreneur. That's their North Star. They're looking for the best entrepreneur who's going to make a business. And that's great. We need those people. We got a lot of those people. None of them will tell you that they're looking for the best technology. And at the beginning, that's what we have to do. We have to find the best technology and invest in that so that we deliver those technologies to the best entrepreneurs, to the best business people, to the best companies who can then take it and run with it. And so what a lot of people are missing about venture is that in deep tech, that's what we have to do. We have to start with the technology, and then lots of things happen. Like a lot of our companies will graduate from venture really early. You got these SaaS holes out here raising CDE rounds for stuff because they can't access public markets. The venture funds were supposed to be a 5 to 7 year SaaS fund, and now they're 10, 11, 12 years in. They can't go public. The acquisition market has been destroyed by the SEC. So they're stuck out there. And so we're not actually necessarily longer. I don't make investments that are going to take 20 years. I got a 10-year fund. So when we're investing, what we're looking at is, can this be commercialized in 5 to 10 years on a venture time horizon?
Yes.
And then recognize that the day we take all this technical risk early on, but in exchange for that, we're not taking market risk. SaaS investors are taking unlimited market risk. Will somebody pay to use the software? The day our companies get their thing working and they get paid on that day, there's no technical risk anymore. It's done. And there's a vast industrial market out there waiting for us. So, and then a lot of times they graduate to debt and project financing. They have assets they can finance, and there's there's power plant financing. If you have an energy thing, there's all kinds of things, and there's offtake agreements for that kind of stuff. There's real revenue associated with these things that can be made early on, because a lot of times you're providing something that is at the end of the day that is commoditized. The proprietary technology is not in the thing you deliver, it's how you deliver it. And so there's a lot of potential to deliver into, like, we got a company that recycles gold out of electronics. There is no product market fit problem for gold. It literally defines liquidity. Like, you could sell as much gold as you can make. So, we don't have the same kinds of milestones and metrics that everybody's so fixated on with software capital.
I mean, just to add to that, and to address also something you mentioned, when it comes to corporates, I think if there is a small gap between VCs and entrepreneurs and startups, you can 3x that gap between corporates and startups. Yeah. Because let's face it, the corporate looks at the startup as a small fish, easy to acquire, and then the founder looks at his company as this house of innovation or something done new. Huge cultural gap between them. He wants them as a customer. They want him as an acquisition. Between founder and corporate. So I think if, especially something like I know we do, is we really talk to the founder to structure the company properly. Yeah. Sorry, and have that either carve out for a specific corporate. Sometimes it's feasible if it's the right strategical decision for the company to do that. And in other cases, you need to position yourself properly to work with corporates. And that kind of bridges the gap, although not completely, but it really makes things better a lot. They startups and corporates do have a big gap that needs to be bridged.
It's not. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's almost like, I think it goes back to the point where there needs to be a proper ecosystem, because when startups start working, it's almost like a trial run. They can start working with SMEs and other startups to sort of build their confidence and also build the product properly before they're ready to go to corporate. So this gap between corporates and startups is a sort of two-way thing, that sometimes the startup is not ready, but they are still eager to make sales, but they're not ready. So corporates lose trust, and then it again feeds back into the whole issue.
Building mode.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it works both ways. That's why when there's a proper ecosystem, startups can build enough credibility and confidence and actually be ready for going and making sales to corporates, which would be easier. That would increase the trust level and would feed it back into the whole setup. But if not, it just is a losing equation after that.
We can beat up on the corporates a little bit too, because they're responsible for this. The truth is, like, we've been telling them they need to innovate or die, and they keep making these entrepreneurial startup teams with a couple of mohawks and a foosball table, and then make them like requisition a desk via fax machine. It's fake startups. Yeah. And so in the US, we had this problem where, like, in the 80s, every big American company had an R&D department full of, PhDs and smart people who were supposed to invent the next generation of technology. And they kept getting their asses kicked by two guys in a garage with no money, no resources, no time. And so corporations did learn from that. They shut down R&D, cost center, get rid of it, but they replaced it with M&A. And that's a way, and I think that's a much more functional example of having a relationship with the people who are actually innovative. You're not going to become innovative. You have an MBA, you're doomed, but you can go party with the people who actually are innovative. And that's what M&A is about. So the corporates need to figure out, okay, how do we make ourselves attractive, accessible, functional, successful at piloting these things that come out of startups? And because the startups need the help. And in some industries, they've done a great job of that. Other, like pharma's doing a pretty good job of that. Some industries are awesome. Other industries really suck at it. And so I'd just take a look at that and say, all right, how are we going to navigate that? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to get any new ideas from within a big company. Even if they existed, they'd be squelched. Yeah. So you're going to have to learn to work with startups.
I think one other thing is which leads to failure is just having an innovation department or a center in a startup, in a corporate. I think innovation in corporates has to be decentralized. That way, maybe one of the reasons it can flourish is when you actually start putting it in a decentralized, fragmented fashion, embedding it into the whole setup. That's when maybe there's a higher chance of success.
I'd go further and say it has to be completely subversive.
Yeah.
Innovation in corporates has to be completely underground.
I mean, in my opinion, what really builds a full sustainable ecosystem and to get the full picture, you need success stories, but not for media. To actually have people who have done it, have the funds to go and fraternize with people like them. They meet over barbecues, they meet in hacking houses, they meet in garages, they meet in workshops. Those are the real silent, unplanned events that actually create ecosystems. And then whether it reaches corporate or not is just a market reality, in my opinion. But corporates do have to wake up to the risk, whether one way or the other. Some of them are very insightful, very smart, and they go and they even invest in ventures. And they invest in startups, not try to replicate it. Like, every bank try to be a neobank.
Yeah.
And then they think that they are a fintech, which is like, okay. And that is a big mistake. And why fintech is a very polarizing use case. Sample case here. It's because fintech is heavily regulated.
Yeah.
Same thing happens in the medical industry and pharma. But in pharma, they cracked the code, as you said.
Yeah.
So why is that?
I honestly have no idea. I can't play with the FDA, so I don't know how they do it. Other people specialize in it. I think it's very important to specialize in it. I think they're masochists or something. It's impressive. I don't know how they do it, but it does give you a sense that if they could do it in pharma, that we ought to be able to do it in other things that are easier.
I mean, the difficult ones, I'm not saying nothing is impossible, but the difficult ones are aviation.
Sure.
But if you look...
Telecom, everything with a 3-letter agency. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I think pharma could do it potentially because it has a lot of the potential for disruption, and the impact of disruption to the big pharma from the startups is one of the highest in the world. Maybe it's one of the reasons they were very conscious of the risks that they could face and the disruption that could face, and they made sure that they had the right formula for doing this. I could guess.
We'll get another episode with somebody from pharma to explain that one.
I'm curious, actually. As I was reflecting, as you're talking about pharma, the one thing that really jumps out at me is the negotiating power they have with the supply chains that they have. I know you love the value chain, the word, but I'll use supply chains. But that's the one thing that comes up is the platform they have is difficult to replicate. And you kind of almost have to go that route if you're going to make success out of any new innovation. When you were talking about, you brought up aviation or some of these other sectors, there's so many players out there. Yes, some of them have a big enough platform to incorporate technology, but there are so many choices. The negotiating power isn't with the supply chain. There's so many out there that you could go to. But yeah, that could be part of it, I guess.
But what about if you actually, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but like pharma doesn't have a global regulator. It is defragmented.
Kinda. I mean, the truth is a lot of countries will follow the FDA because they don't have their own, right? And that's true for a lot of, the US is heavy-handed about a lot of these things. The FCC sets policy globally in some sense. There's a FAA sets policy globally in some sense. And I mean, part of that is just sufficient to draft off of them, but also in some cases, like in energy, the U.S. is pretty proactive about determining who can have nuclear reactors and things like that. So I think that, but that said, I think one of the exciting things is that for all the suckiness of deglobalization, what we're getting is some jurisdictions that are becoming more independent, and they're willing to go their own way and make their own decisions and choose their own fate and not just follow the US on policy. And so I think for deep tech companies, it's exciting because some of these things, we're going to be able to build them faster outside the purview of the US in other regions. And that's part of what's so exciting about the Middle East. I mean, this is a place with great leadership. We have a hard time claiming that these days in the US. Hard to see examples of great leadership in the US, but here you can see it every day. I mean, you see the effect of having leaders that are engaged, making good choices, a sort of, I call it a benevolent dictatorship. Hopefully I won't get canceled in UAE for saying that, but it's an amazing thing to see. You wouldn't run a company as a democracy, like it's wildly inefficient. So on a nation scale, being able to see that makes me very optimistic about bringing technologies to life in this region. That's why I come here. I think there are things we can build faster in this region than we can in the US. And to me, that's really exciting.
I'm going to put you on the spot, but you said nuclear reactor, not anybody can.
Yeah.
Can you take just 1 minute
Sure.
and tell us something about that?
So we invented one of the modern nuclear reactors at my lab before, which is called the Intellectual Ventures Lab. And so we invented this nuclear reactor that's powered by nuclear waste. And it's a modern, safe reactor design, can't melt down like Chernobyl. There's
Small
really
scale
nothing.
as well, right?
What's that?
It goes to a small scale as
You
well.
could make it small, but small is kind of a misnomer in nuclear reactors. People think small sounds friendly, but the truth is we need lots of big reactors. And if you're going to build one, the cost of the reactor is about all the stuff around it, not necessarily the reactor core. So you might as well make it big while you're at it. So anyway, this reactor we invented in 2007, and we're still not allowed to build it. It's been 17 years. So if you got a startup, think about that. We're 17 years in. Bill Gates is chairman of the company, and we still don't have a reactor. So I don't work on it anymore. But that company's called TerraPower. They're starting to build a kind of a test reactor in Wyoming now. But, it's just one of these things where we haven't built any reactor. We haven't been able to certify any new reactor technology for 45 years. The NRC, which regulates nuclear in the US, as far as I can tell, has been an anti-nuclear agency. They just didn't certify any new technology. So we're running reactors that were designed with pencils and slide rules before we were born.
And that is the type of risks that we kind of look at when we're investing in deep tech, right?
That's right. I look at that and say it's got to give at some point. And there's 190 countries. At least, there's at least a couple that are willing to not follow the NRC. And I'm hoping, that we can find a few more.
That's actually quite a good example. We recently invested in a company that has it's a medical technology, and the FDA it's not on their priority list to look at it.
Yeah.
So we actually went into clinical trials, not we, them, in Cuba.
Yes.
Cool. I love it. Great.
And the results out of that were very encouraging, very well documented cases, amazing doctors there that would fast track them or elsewhere to get FDA, and like in the US to get FDA now. So as you mentioned, 198 other countries.
Yeah, we need,
point.
All these jurisdictions play to your strengths. There's a lot of things the US sucks at and that Europe sucks at, and that's especially around regulations. So we need DMZs. I'm not saying be wildly irresponsible, but a lot of things could be tried in these places that don't have the same risk profile, that don't have such litigious societies. I mean, a lot of the problem in the US is that, like with nuclear reactors, you start a nuclear reactor project, you start 1,000 lawsuits, just as a matter of course. Like, that's insanity. And we don't have that kind of problem in some other countries. So a lot can be done. Look, China's built nuclear reactors on time, on budget, no lawsuits. It's amazing. So
I think it comes back to your point when you said that deep tech doesn't have any boundaries. It has to be a global play.
100%.
Because this is where you actually can look at such opportunities and try to scale.
I think another one just that came up in my mind when you were asking about a couple of these things before, that I think we should say is And again, I'm kind of on one extreme end because I only do the earliest stages, but I don't want my companies to get acquired. I don't want to build companies that get bought up by a big mining conglomerate or a big energy company. What I want to do is get this technology working, prove that it works. And then the one thing that I think is super valuable from Uber is their playbook. Let's take the Uber playbook, marry it to an actual technology. Instead of trying to fix these old and busted industries, we're just going to build new ones. We're just going to replace them. I'm a venture fund. I need venture returns, right? If you give me 10x my money back, I'm like way worse than a loan shark. A loan shark only wants like 2x his money back. If I get 2x my money back, I'm going to be pissed. If I get 10x my money back, I'll be, I need 100x my money back. I'm the worst loan you can get. But think about that, founders. If you're taking money from VCs, they want 100x their money back from you because they got to pay for 99 other things that didn't work. That's just the fact of life. If you can accept that, great. Most people don't even realize that's the bargain you're making. So, but what I'm saying is, look, fixing industries, that's too slow. In Silicon Valley, we gave up on that. We don't try to fix industries. We try to replace them. And when we get a hold of a superpower that makes us, 100x or 1,000x better, we're going to replace you. And I think that's what needs to get done. That's creative destruction, and that's how we're going to advance humanity. So,
I think that's a great point you made there around the cost of equity. And a lot of people don't really think about that when they're like, oh, I don't have to pay that back. But really you are, and you have to. And there's an expectation there that you have to live by with investors that have this 100x on their back, the back of their mind in terms of what they're expecting this investment to make, what this dollar means to them, and writing that check.
Yeah, for sure.
And one thing I want to potentially marry is what you mentioned in terms of what you've seen in this region, in terms of willingness to listen, willingness to sort of look at opportunities and drive change.
Yeah.
And the point you brought up around community. And what I want to sort of put out there as well is this notion of how can we drive that change via the community? How do we get the community heard, the innovators, the people working in their garages? How do we get their voices heard with the right people, with the right sort of optionality on how that support will come out? Yeah. What I mean by that is not have a problem and leave it at that, but how do we sort of as a crowd, as a community, look at this, suss it out, find solutions, and start sending that to people that are willing to listen. And honestly, one thing I want to throw out there is that's why we're here as well as a fund, is we don't just want to sit back and watch it. We're invested in startups, in funds. And the idea is we want to hear as much of it as we can to direct this to a lot of the decision makers. We want to hear the portfolio of our funds coming back to us and saying, we've heard 1, 2, 3, there are bottlenecks. Go to the innovators themselves, ask them the same question. But what's more beautiful is the entire community coming together and doing this in a way where it's coming with a suggested sort of path, or maybe a few that can be then looked at, assessed, and then sort of taken to the right level of support and on the other side. And thanks for bringing that up. And I just want to put out there that we're here to hear you.
I mean, one of the most beautiful things, and when you have a movement of people, culture, and different backgrounds coming together to create really great things. So you have these, like Dubai is, this melting pot almost of cultures and people from everywhere in the world. So the best of the best can actually be together and do and build. And this is what I love about this place. And nothing builds a more valuable community than this. When people just put everything aside and just start building.
It's the most important thing.
Really, it is, isn't it?
In Silicon Valley, and I come from like the Silicon Valley of the 80s and 90s before it started to suck. I mean, a lot of what made it work and why it is so important to be there and why it was so successful is just that you were surrounded by people who would give you the benefit of the doubt. If you have a crazy idea, they're going to start by trying to help you figure out how to make it work instead of try and tell you why it'll never work. And that's not true everywhere else in the world. And so building a community of people who are all willing to try and help each other out is the most important thing.
I think, building the right community is probably an outcome of how the location or how it's viewed. So openness is the right word, because having the community is basically becomes the outcome of what you follow as a society and how your outlook is. So it automatically becomes, once you start encouraging, openness, community will get built because people will get attracted. Like this is what happened in Dubai, and this is what is happening here. That Dubai is welcoming to most people, and this is how it actually attracts people from all different parts of the world, from different areas, thinking that there is something there. We'll figure out, and it's welcoming for everybody. And this is how we build a community. And this is what we did as well when we started doing our community. It's open for all. What comes out of it is then you decide what happens, but it's open.
I mean, just as, let's say, I would like to hear from everyone your last remarks. What would be on the topic and the discussion, everything, not in reflection, but what do you think I mean, we can record this for 5 or 6 hours probably. It's a very big topic, but dear to your heart and something you'd like to put out there. Let's do one each and call it off, because there is a very angry guy there behind the camera looking at me.
Anyone want to go first? Or? I guess top of mind, I mean, a few things that came out of this discussion is the value of community, the value of getting the right attention at the right time, but then really having that connection. That's why I love the word community, is having that right connection to hear it, to have the pulse, to be able to give it the right attention and enable it to thrive. And I really appreciate the discussion we've had, and I've learned quite a bit from it.
I mean, for me, it's the community and the ecosystem effect, because there is a lot of noise today. And without the power of community, you can't, and the value chains, by the way, you can't really interface with value. Value is very subjective. It's different things to different people. And we all want different things, but we can all achieve them if all the cogs move properly and we all work together.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize that everybody can play to their strengths, and that matters because there's all these different stages of the life cycle for new technologies. And to bring them to life, we need everybody to do their part at their stage. And, recognizing the part, and a lot of people, like the opportunists you described before, they're not being specific about what they do, what they're going to be good for. They're going to waste your time. VCs all want to be entertained. They'll sit and listen to a story because they'll all say they do seed deals because they just want to see the stuff early. They're not actually going to write checks at that stage. They're lying to you, but it's because they want to be entertained and they want to feel like they have a story to tell at a party this weekend. It's not what they actually do. And you can't tell from the outside. You'll never know. You just have to go pitch them anyway. But I think there's a important thing to understand, which is that, most investors are going to invest in a spreadsheet, not technology. They're going to invest in a founder, not technology. And that's more and more true the later and later stage you get to. You'll find a couple of crazy, very early stage investors like me who will invest in technology and will not, and we'll make our own spreadsheet. But that's pretty rare. And so depending on what you're doing, you just want to understand like what kind of person are you pitching and what kind of money are you trying to get and what is that person expecting to get out of it? And then you can build good relationships with investors.
I think for me, delinking the hype from the deep tech investments or deep tech opportunities, as well as how important it is to understand, as you said, what does revenue really mean for a SaaS company or a deep tech company? There's a big difference.
Yeah.
First revenue for deep tech is completely different from first revenue for SaaS.
Yeah.
SaaS, there's always a question, as you said, whether this product will get replaced or will somebody stop using it. But for deep tech, first revenue means you actually proved, and there is a whole different market out there So those are two different worlds. Those are two different parameters, and it cannot be compared. And I think this is something consciously VCs or whoever is making an investment has to realize that. So I love that part. This is something was really good.
One last thing on that, just so it's clear, the people we need to invest in deep tech are former SaaS investors. The people we need to build deep tech startups are software people.
Couldn't agree more with that, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, and the proof is, I helped start Blue Origin in 2001. And if you look at, you probably didn't hear of Blue Origin, but you heard of SpaceX for decades. And the reason is they hired software nerds and told them to build a rocket. We hired a bunch of aerospace engineers who'd spent their whole careers working for the government, and they started writing memos. So it's just a very different thing. And look at Tesla, hire software geeks and tell them to build a car. That's what happened, right? So and the reason I say this is so important is because software people are the only ones who in one lifetime had an idea, built it, shipped it, scaled it, sold it, did that 2 or 3 times. Every other industry was built before you were born. The people working in it are only there for the last stage of the life cycle, and the last stage of the life cycle is dying. So we need the people who understand how to build something new to come do the deep tech stuff.
Really, thank you. That's very insightful. I'm not gonna end this episode without mentioning a book, because I almost do that every time I was in this podcast. And I love reading. And today I didn't mention any books.
Oh.
But I'll let him tell us about a book. We're going to put you on the spot here. So I came across this book that actually you are one of the people in the book.
Oh.
Can you tell us about it and what's it about, the author? And I'm sorry about putting you on the spot, but I enjoy it.
Not at all. I didn't expect the question, but a very inspirational lady called Eleni Kitra decided to speak to a number of very inspiring individuals that she found inspiring, and decided to write a book about those inspiring individuals. One of them was Anusha Ansari, who, speaking of space, was the first space tourist, for example. And I happened to be part of the book that she put together called Force, and what the word force means for a lot of these people that are inspiring to her, or an inspiration to her, basically. So yeah, very blessed to be part of that book. That she published just over a week ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
If anybody's listening or watching this, check out the book. It's actually
Definitely.
good. I really enjoyed having a very early read. I haven't gone through the whole thing yet.
Happy to sign it off.
I really thank you. This has been extremely insightful. I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you guys.
Thanks, you guys.
And thank for everybody who tunes in as well.